The Sikha we will be learning is a look at the Sikhas, Chelik Chavov, the second Sikha to Parshas Mishpotim. In the Sikha, Rebbe talks about, as we will see, the connection between Parshas Va'era, Parshas Yisrei, and Parshas Mishpotim, and even later he talks about the connection to Parshas Truma, etc., but these Parshas. So as Akdoma, I just want to say that in Parshas Yisrei, the Torah talks about all the preparations that were done to Matan Torah, before Matan Torah, and then Matan Torah itself, Seres Adibris. Then comes Parsha Mishpotim. There, the way Rashi says, there it talks about Pashas Dinim, the Dinim that the Torah says in the Mishpotim. And then again, towards the end of Parsha Mishpotim, again it talks about, first it talks about Eretz Yisrael, and then again it talks about certain things that have to do with Matan Torah. And exactly what and when we'll see soon. So the Rebbe says, Besima Sedre, at the end of the Sedre of Mishpotim, not only the Torah Farendik Parshas Dinim, after the Torah finishes the Parsh, as Rashi calls it, the Parshas Dinim, the beginning of Mishpotim, and all the Dinim of Avodim and Eved, and then the Nizikin, all kinds of Dinim. And then the Torah, and after the Torah talks about the Parsha, Hinenech Sheleach Maloch, Shem says, I'm going to send a Malach to take you into Eretz Yisrael, and he talks about going into Eretz Yisrael, different things. So after that, the Torah says, and Hashem said to Moshe, come up. Hashem said, come up to Hashem. And the Torah goes out about different things that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu. Stellt sich Rashi die Werte, weil Moshe Omar Alei. So Rashi quotes from the Pasuk, and as we always know, that the word that Rashi quotes from the Pasuk are those exact words are negated to what Rashi says, whether it's to the Kasha, sometimes to the Teretz. But the Rashi quotes the words Vel Moshe Omar Alei. The Pasuk says Vel Moshe Omar Alei El Hashem, but Rashi says the words Vel Moshe Omar Alei, and he's mafarish and explains like this: Parsha zu nemra kedem aseres adibris. This parsha from here on, when the Torah tells all kinds of things that the Eibusha told Moshe Rabbeinu, etc., this goes back to what Hashem said before the aseres adibris. Ubedalad b'sivan nemra alei, and at the fourth day of Sivan, that's when he was told alei. The truth is, in Parshas Yisrei, it talks about all the preparations to Matan Torah, what happened on the second day of Sivan, and then the third day of Sivan, and the fourth day of Sivan, it goes on and on. So here, when the Pasuk talks about what David said to Moshe, different things he said to him, starting with the words, Vel Moshe Omar Alei Hashem, so Rashi says this was said going back to what it talks about in Parshas Yisrei. This was said before the Aseres Adibris, which are in Parshas Yisrei, Ubedalat B'Sivan Nemra Alei. And this Alei, when Hashem said, come up, was said the fourth day of Sivan, which is as a preparation to Matan Torah. The says that the Parsha Shtei Dosh Leib came, it comes out that the Parsha is written not in the proper order, because we already learned before about the preparations and about Matan Torah itself. Then we learn Parsha Mishpotim, and now it goes back. In other words, according to the Seder Azmanim, according to chronological order, it should have been written before. But this Parsha is written, according to Rashi, not in the proper place, so to speak, according to the order of the Zman at the time. What forced Rashi, who explains Poshe Pshat and Posig? According to Poshe Pshat, we would normally learn that whatever says comes after what it said before in Seder. So there must be some reason why Rashi says that no, even though it sounds like that, but it's not. So the reason why in Pshuto Shemikra Rashi has to say, as this parsha was before Aseres Adibris, unitvies lene kama v'kama pashtonia mikra, the parsha gezoge von bim kemen noch Matan Torah, and not like some meforshim, and those that explain the Chumash al Pipshat, like the Even Ezra, and the Rashbam, and the Ramban, and the Barbanel, and the Rechaim, all of them learn differently. That from here on, when it says, Moshe Omar El Hashem, and Hashem told him all kinds of things, this take was said where it is written, noch Matan Torah, take. These are things that Hashem said to Moshe after Matan Torah. We're talking about Moshe going up to Hashem after Matan Torah. So what's the reason why Rashi doesn't learn like that? So the Rebbe says, if the Mefarshim say, number one, from Lashon HaKosov, from the wording of the Pasuk, the Pasuk says, Vel Moshe Omar Alei Al Hashem. And to Moshe, he said, go up to Hashem. Neat. It doesn't say, Vayemer Hashem or Moshe. Hashem said to Moshe. It's like his other place. Anything that comes now, so it starts off, Hashem spoke to Moshe. Here it says, and to Moshe he said, is mashmet seems, as Omar Kvar Kedemela Parashat Dilil, that when he says in a certain place, and Moshe and Hashem had said to Moshe, means that he said it before. So Rashi learns that this is said before. Before meaning, before Matan Torah. This goes back to what it says in Pasha Yisrei. That's one reason. That's from the wording of the Pasuk. And the second thing, from Teichana Parsha, from what the Parsha is about. Because the Inyan for Nichnus Avesenim Lebrisas. Rashi says, this Parsha from here on, where all the things Eibush said Moshe Rabbeinu are things how our forefathers, which means the Yidden, went into a covenant. Was read the Ziltner Parsha. These are the things that he said he took, the Yidden made a covenant with the Yidden. Is a Zach, but the Seichel is Mechayiv. I mean, that's a Geton, Edem not Bakum the Teira, as a Chonet dazu. Makes sense that to make the covenant must have happened before Matan Torah. First, you make a covenant, you make the connection, and then you tell them what to do and things like that. So since this is the Parsha that talks about, Parsha, the end of Mishpotim again, that talks about the covenant David made with the Eden, so it must be, according to the Teichon Inyan, must be that this happened before Matan Torah, and that's what makes Rashi say that this was before Matan Torah. So it comes out that because of this reason, Rashi has to say that this happened before. As is aber schwer, but it's not simple to say that. Why? Now, according to this, the Seder of the way the Pasha is written is not according to the chronological order at all. And that's not really a problem, because Rashi said different places, there is a rule, Ein Mugdem Mucha B'Teira means that the Torah is not written according to the chronological order. It doesn't mean whatever is written earlier or later means that that's the Seder, how the things happened. So that could be. So what's the problem? We're saying here, this it's not going ala Seder. There's no problem. You could say that. But we understand that we only say this when there is no choice. There has to be a reason why it's changed. And Rashi is forced to say that we see that it goes on before. But why did the Torah write it in a different Seder? This before, why didn't the Torah write it before? Now, the rule is that Ein Mukdem Mucha B'Teira doesn't go according to the Seder the way things happened. But that's only if there is a reason. That means like this. Ein Mukdem Mucha B'Teira means it doesn't go according to the Zmanim, according to the chronological order. That means there must be a reason why the Torah should. Normally, the Torah should go in the normal order. If you have a good reason that it doesn't, for why it shouldn't go in the normal order, so you say that reason. And it's not a problem not to go in the chronological order. But there has to have a reason why the Torah changed the order. We find it in Rashi in different places. Example, if in Posek Vayomas Terach b'Choron, on the Posek where it says that Terach died in Choron. So there, as Nordem was Rashi Mevayra Misas Chenik Ben Lachish Yotz Avrom Choron, that Rashi says that Terach died after Avram left Choron, but Lepela is written in the Torah before Avram left Choron. So Rashi writes that this was really after. It's written before, but really it happened after something that says later. And that is Mamshich. Rashi continue. Umaksh Rashi asks the kasha. Why did the Torah write about Terach's death before Amram left? What does that show? That there is a question. Rashi writes a Beloshin question. Why is it a question? What's the problem? It was written before, even though it happened later, because that could happen in the Torah. The fact that Rashi asks a kasha why and gives an answer is a siman that if we have a good reason, the Torah does that. But you have to have a good reason. That's what Rashi asks. Why is there no reason? So if so, that you have to have a reason. Why the Torah changed the order from the Seder Azmanim, how it happened in order of time. We have to understand here. So Taka, we said before, Rashi has a proof that this Parsha, the end of Mishpotim, is going back to the time of Parsha Yisrei before, but nevertheless, why is this Parsha Shem said to Moshe, go up? And this, as Rashi says, happened before Aseres Adibris on the 4th of Sivan. Why is the Shtein Shel Leib came? Why is it written not in this place? Why did the Torah do that? It has to be a reason why. In other words, there's two things. From where Rashi gets it, as we said before, the Mefarshim explain where Rashi gets it. The Kasha is not on Rashi. Rashi says, I see from the Loshen or whatever, that this is what it means. Why did the Kasha on the Torah? Why did the Torah do that? Why did the Torah write it here, not in the way it belongs? There's no chronological order. Doesn't mean that for no reason the Torah just changes the order. If there's a reason, the Torah doesn't mind changing. So we have to find what's the reason here why the Torah did not write in the normal order. Especially as Leib According to this, it comes out that the way the Torah tells us the whole story concerning Matan Torah and the preparation to Matan Torah is very strange. Let's see what it looks like. In Parsha Yisrei, actually the Rabbi brings here in Sarah 17 that Abarbanel writes clearly that Pshat Taksuvim v'Sidron leYisbru al Tasazeh, that Rasha's Pshat doesn't fit the Seder. Rasha doesn't. Your mind can't take it. And the Ramban writes also the same thing. Eina Parshas boys kesidron v'leikim mashmon klal. The Parshas don't go keseder. So they argue with Rashi. But what's their kasha? That the whole Seder doesn't fit. So let's speak about Rashi. Rashi says that this is the Pshat, not like they learned this was said before. So according to Rashi, why did the Torah not write it in the proper order? But then the Rebbe says it is another problem here that it doesn't look like it fits. In Parsha Yisrei, Parsha Yisrei talks about the preparations to Matan Torah. For Yom Hasheni, what happened the second day, which is Beis Sivan, the second day of Sivan. For Yom Shlishi, the third day, which the third day of Sivan. Not tale for Nevi L'Chedesh, and part of what happened on the fourth day of the month. Keiladim Tzivei Hashem, including Hashem commanding a Prisha V'Agbola to separate from the wives and to limit and make a fence around the mountain. And the Torah continues by Yekadesh Yisrael, He made them holy, V'yemer Alam Hayid Nechenim, be ready, Atik Shalisha. All that is written in Parshas Yisrei. And the Noch in Parshas Yisrei, what says after that? Then it talks about Matan Torah, which happened on the 6th or the 7th in the month, as the Rebbe says in order 23. Like two opinions brought down in Rashi, two opinions in Gemara, but Rashi brings both opinions. One opinion says it happened on the 6th of Sim, on the 7th, but the Torah in Parshas Yisrei talks about what happened on those days. And then then what Hashem said to Moshe after the Aseret Adibris, all that is written in Parshas Yisrei. When he saw Mishpotim, at the end of Parsha Mishpotim, kehrt sich the Torah zurück zu Mirois from the Altzim. Then in end of Parsha Mishpotim, the Torah goes back. After you have a whole Parsha Mishpotim, the Torah goes back to what happened on the 4th of Sivan. That's Rashi says that when Hashem said to Moshe go up was on the 4th of Sivan. And Moshe had told Eden mitzvah Prisha V'Agbola. It says that Moshe told Eden the mitzvah of separating from the wives and surrounding the mountain. And that's called on Mishpotim. The Pasuk says Moshe told. It's all written at the end of Mishpotim. All the Mishpotim, which means the Zayim mitzvahs, the 7 mitzvahs of the Goyim, Neneach, Shabbos, and Shnitla Memora. And these all were given in Memora, so Moshe Rabbeinu repeated them again. So the Torah goes back in end of Parsha Mishpotim to what happened on the 4th of Sivan, and to Chamisha b'Sivan, and to 50th of Sivan. Like Rashi says, a certain part there was on the 5th of Sivan. Very strange, a strange order. Talks about the 2nd day of Sivan, the 3rd day of Sivan, the 4th day of Sivan, he says there. And then he says, Matan Torah, all that in Yisrei. Then, at the end later, he goes back to those days that the Torah spoke about before. Why did the Torah do that? Nochat mi and Seder HaParshas like Pirish Rashi is another problem, another question we have in the Seder, the order of the Parshas, according to Rashi. The Pashtonim are now, the other Meforshim that we mentioned, the Chalenen, that the Parshas Gizogim were noch Matan Torah. The other Meforshim will learn that the end of Mishpotim, which talks about what Hashem said to Moshe, they learn it when it was done after Matan Torah. But according to them, they say, Ados was a state weiter, Yove Moshe, Vayisapar lo Miskol Divri Hashem was kol HaMishpotim. It says in the Psukim, at the end of Mishpotim, Moshe came, told the Yidden all the words of Hashem and all the Mishpotim. So they learn, what does it mean? He told them all the Mishpotim. What's Mishpotim? But zitzich to the Mishpotim, the dinim from their Sedra. It's talking about the Mishpotim and the dinim that's written in Parsha Mishpotim. That's the Mishpotim it's talking about. It's the Parsha Mishpotim. With ein angesagt, geworden zu Moshe Baby Yem Matan Torah. That according to them, he taught them on the day of Matan Torah, he taught them the Mishpotim. Which Mishpotim? All the Mishpotim that are written in Parsha Mishpotim. He was told by David on the day of Matan Torah, and he told it them right away. Which means, according to them, when it says Moshe here in this Parsha Mishpotim at the end, it says Moshe told them all the Mishpotim, means what he did on the day of Matan Torah. So all these Mishpotim that we learned in Parsha Mishpotim from the beginning of the Mishpotim till this section, most of the Parsha Mishpotim was all said on the day of Matan Torah. Not later on in the 40 days when Moshe Rabbeinu was on Har Sinai. Aber Rashi beperusha Teres mefarish Rashi in Pasha Kisisa explains as a chukim v'mishpotim shebe'ela mishpotim sind nigzog geworden zu Moshe in the Aboyim Yom Rishayim when they're given Bahar. Rashi learns that when it says that he told him chukim and the mishpotim, that all the laws that are in Parsha Mishpotim, they were all told to Moshe not the day of Matan Torah. It was after Matan Torah. Moshe went up to the mountain for 40 days, a few times, but this is the first 40 days he went up. So he was Bahar. That's when he taught them, David taught them, and David taught Moshe all these Mishpotim and Parsha Mishpotim. So again, the other Mefarshim learned that the Mishpotim that it says here, Moshe told them, that refers to the Mishpotim, that refers to the whole Parsha Mishpotim, and Parsha Mishpotim was said in the day of Matan Torah. According to Rashi, it was not said in the day of Matan Torah. It refers to all these Mishpotim, but these Mishpotim were told later in the 40 days he was Bahar. Well, according to Rashi, comes out, between the two stories about the preparation that the Pasuk talks about in Parsha Yisrei till the 5th of Sivan, and Matan Torah, the preparations to Matan Torah. The Torah mafsik nit nor mit achonas Matan Torah and shisha b'sivin Matan Torah. The Torah separates not only with the preparations for Matan Torah that happened on the 6th day of Sivan and Matan Torah, nor eich mit vielen yonim what the Rabbi had gesagt Moshe meshach haboyim yem shalachar. It talks about many things that Rabbi told Moshe later on, because according to Rashi, the whole Parsha Mishpotim was told later on. In Parshas Yisrael talks about what happened the 5th day of Sivan, the 2nd day of Sivan, the 3rd day of Sivan, the 4th day of Sivan. Then it talks about Matan Torah, the 6th day of Sivan. And then it talks about what happened in the 40 days Moshe Rabbeinu was in Har Sinai. And then it goes back to the Achonas of Matan Torah. That's what comes out, because Rashi says what says in the end of Mishpotim is the Achonas of Matan Torah, and it goes back. It's very strange. It talks about the Achonas and the days of Sivan and Matan Torah, and then he's changes and talks about Mishpotim that according to Rashi is something that he said in the 40 days later, and then he goes back to the preparation that he did before by Matan Torah time. So it's also strange. Nochmer goes even more than that. Noch the alle dinim Mishpotim for Parsha Mishpotim. After all the dinim and the Mishpotim of Parsha Mishpotim, and noch the Parsha, and after the Parsha where it says Vel Moshe Omer Ali al Hashem, he told Moshe to go up Hashem. So we have to say like this: we have everything in Parsha Yisrei. Then we have all the dinim of Parsha Mishpotim. Then it says, Moshe Omer Hashem told me to go up. And then at the end of that, the end of Parsha Mishpotim, Ved Besim HaSeder Etzel, to the end of the Seder, it says, Vayemer Hashem Moshe, Hashem said to Moshe, Alei Alai Hora, go up to the mountain. Vayeshom, be there, Etna Locho Esluchas Heaven, I will give you the luchas, the stones. Vayoka Moshe, the person Moshe got up, Vayoeli went up. Elahari went up to the mountain. He went up and it was in the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. This, Rashi says, happened right after Matan Torah, not in the 40 days later. So very end of the parsha, he's talking back again about what happened right by Matan Torah. Because this last part goes back, according to Rashi, to what happened right after Matan Torah, in connection to Matan Torah. So if you look at this, come down according to Rashi, from them Zman, that even the way the things are written in about this period, Aliyas Moshe lahar noch Matan Torah, when Moshe went up to the mountain after Matan Torah, when sein dort Aboyim, and he was there for 40 days, that in the Torah ibegerissen, the Torah breaks it up in middle with aninya from Asman Mugdam, from something that happened before. Which means like this. First, the Torah tells us about the laws, but the Rabbi gesagt, Moshe nit Aboyim in Bahar. According to Rashi, whatever it says in Parsha Mishpotim, the whole Parsha Mishpotim was in the 40 days. So first the Torah talks about the 40 days, what happened in the 40 days. And then noch a mafsik sein with the Parsha for Far Matan Torah, and then he comes to the Parsha, to where Rashi learns, Moshe Omer Alei al Hashem. That's going back to something that happened before Matan Torah. He starts a Parsha Mishpotim with what happened during the 40 days. Then he goes back to something that happened before Matan Torah. And then he said, then what he said at the end of Mishpotim, and then comes what he said to him, go up, this happened right by Matan Torah. So he talks about in Parsha Yisrael before Matan Torah and Matan Torah. Then he talks about Mishpotim, the 40 days. So in this inyan itself, when Moshe went up to the mountain after Matan Torah, we can look at the two sections. One section is what happened right away, Matan Torah, and then what happened within the 40 days. So he starts off telling us, according to Rashi, what happened in the 40 days. That's the beginning. That's the whole parsha of Mishpotim, according to Rashi. After that, he comes back and goes back what happened before, and then goes back to what happened after Matan Torah, but not in the 40 days, but what happened in the beginning, right after Matan Torah. The order is a little very strange. Why he goes back and forth and back and forth. The Rebbe says I could explain it like this. But Matan Torah, two things accomplished. What happened? Number one, the Rebbe gave him Torah. The Rebbe gave us the Torah, which means the mitzvahs v'hilchas HaTorah to Yidden. The Rebbe gave the Yidden the mitzvahs and the halachas of Torah. Pasha told them exactly what they have to do, how to behave. A second thing that happened, Yidden seien to them geworden Avdi Hashem. Yidden became servants of Hashem. Mishanemer, like it says, when David spoke to Moshe about taking Yid out of Mitzrayim, he said, what will happen when you go out? You will serve Hashem on this mountain. Tavdu means, which meant the Matan Torah, you will become avodim. The Loshen Rasha, like Rasha says in a different place, as Yidden seien geworden Mishpotim. He doesn't use the word avodim. He says Yidden by Matan Torah. Hashem alekecha. Asher tzich men Mitzrayim. So Rasha says you become Mishpotim. Mishpotim means given over to me. You're my avodim. So that's two things. There's one thing you have to. He told you what to do, and then said you are given over to me. Und die beide Protim der Rebbe Mate ist gewesen gleich in der ersten Dibber zu Moshe mit Messina b'Shem b'Sivim. These two things, the first preparation that David started making, telling Moshe to tell the Eden, included both these points, because this is the beginning. So he set the foundation. So on the second day of Sivan, when he came to Midbar Sinai and David started the preparations. So the first thing David told Moshe to tell the Eden is this: Kei Tamar, go tell the Eden. Atem Reisim, you saw what happened in Mitzrayim. Ba'ata, now, what I want from you. Im Shemei Atishma Bekeli, you should listen to my voice. Ushmartem es Brisi, listen to my keep my covenant. Vayisem li Zgula, you'll be special to me. So what do we see from here? As for Eden, David was mentioning, as for Eden Monsir, that Eden expected from the Eden, number one, Shemei Atishma Bekeli, is following the Tzivoy Hashem. First, he said, you should listen to me. That's listening to the commandments, what Hashem said. And then he said, the second thing he said, Ushmartem es Brisi. You should keep my covenant. This is a lotion of Rashi that I'm going to make with you to keep the mitzvahs. But there's two things. There's keeping the mitzvahs and there's the covenant to keep the mitzvahs. Ados says in Eifen from Bris that I want you to keep the mitzvahs, but it's not stam. You could a person keep the mitzvahs, but not because he has a covenant with the person. I'm listening to you. No, they want, besides the fact that you're going to listen, I want it should be a bris, a covenant. Eden haben sich gebunden mit Neibischen, Mishpotim. Eden connected themselves to Hashem, tied themselves. That's like a bris is when you make a bris between two people or two things. So you make a bris. So the Eden tied. So the Eibush said in the first day, the Eibush said, Ba'efim Kloli, what is expected of you? And he said, Lechatchila, two things is going to happen. Since I took you out of Mitzrayim, I'm going to bring you here. And what's going to happen? Keep my mitzvahs and make a bris with me. Und das ist der Teichen Achilles zwischen den zwei Parshas wegen der Achonis von Matan Torah. And that's the difference between the two places, the two Parshas, where the Torah talks about their preparation to Matan Torah, which is Pasha Yisrael and Pasha Seinu. We spoke about the way the Torah describes the preparation to Matan Torah in Yisrael, and then the way the Torah describes it in Pasha Mishpotim. This will be the difference. In Parsha Yisrael, Parsha Yisrael talks mainly about the giving of the mitzvahs. Hashem giving us the mitzvahs Torah. The Aseres HaDibros. Aseres HaDibros are mitzvahs. And the Rebbe says here, mainly it talks about it, because as we said before, and that's the Rebbe writes in order 38, that he did mention, as we said before, that on the second day of Sivan, the first preparation he made, he mentioned both. But then he went after Bechlolis, he mentioned both, he went on. First, in Parsha Yisrael, the preparation was concerning keeping the mitzvahs. So there he talks about Aseres HaDibros. What's Aseres HaDibros? 10 mitzvahs. Al derech ze Parshas Mizbeach, was is a hemshich yosher to Matan Torah. Then after Aseres HaDibros, it talks about the mitzvah of making the Mizbeach, which is connected to Matan Torah. With the posuk that says, Leib said right after Matan Torah, Atem Reisim, you saw what I talked to you. Remember, Leisas and Nitya, don't make Avodah Zarah, Mizbeach Adom Atasa. Make a Mizbeach of earth, whatever. So we see he's connecting it to Matan Torah. He says, you saw Matan Torah, so make a Mizbeach. So this is all part of Matan Torah, and Mizbeach is again a mitzvah, telling him a certain mitzvah. And the Rebbe, so therefore, since what the Torah is talking about is the Proteus in Pasha Yisrael about Yidden being given the mitzvahs, the Rebbe. Therefore, so when you tell about the preparation, the mitzvahs, so it talks about mitzvahs, that the preparation was also done through mitzvahs. They're preparing themselves to receive the mitzvahs. So the preparation is also through the operation of the Matan Torah, which is mainly mitzvahs. They also got mitzvahs. The mitzvahs Prisha Hagbol, he told the mitzvah separating from the wives before Matan Torah, and the Hagbolim be surrounding the mountain. The fact is that Rabbi Mudgish for the Reibish that only the nation of the mitzvahs. That's why the Torah stresses how Moshe, Reibish told Moshe the mitzvahs. Valder as Moshe has the Ibri gave to Eden, and also that Moshe gave it. It's all about the mitzvahs. Torah stresses that Moshe was told certain to tell Eden the mitzvah. He gave him the mitzvah. It's all mitzvahs. That's what the point of Parsha Yisrei is, because it's talking about the aspect of Matan Torah giving us the mitzvahs. So the Achonis had that aspect in it, that there were certain mitzvahs that were given. Schenken in Parsha Mishpotim, but Mishpotim at the end of Mishpotim, redt wegen der zweiten Linie in the Matan Torah. There, when it talks about the preparation of the Matan Torah, according to Rashi, it's talking about what happened before Matan Torah. The preparation is talking about the second thing. The krisis bris zwischen dem Eibishter und Eden, making the covenant between Hashem and the Eden. Durch welche Eden seien geworden, Meshubodim, die Eden came, Meshubah became the Avodim of Hashem. But was sie geworden durch die Protim Pulas, was werden der Zell da. That happened not through mitzvahs. When you prepare for receiving mitzvahs, it's through mitzvahs. Preparing here, making the krisis bris, is not through giving mitzvahs. But it is what the Torah says in Parsha Mishpotim. What is that? There it tells us that Eden said Nasa, Amiras Nasa, and Eden said Nasa. Now, in Parsha Yisro, they also said Nasa, but that's part of the beginning. We said in the beginning, the second day of Sim, the first preparation included that too. There it says Nasa, but here the Nasa is specifically when the Geya Yidden said later on, the fourth day, they said, we will do. Unasa Vanishma, there also said, we will do before we will even understand, before we will hear. This is the Kabbalah for Eden. This is the Eden accepting, not that they'll do mitzvahs, accepting that they're connected to Hashem. It's an exception of being given over to Hashem. Ksiva Sefer Abris, there it talks about here also about writing the Sefer Abris. Certain things Moshe wrote down, the Torah says in the end of Mishpatim, and he calls it Sefer Abris. He's writing down the Sefer that deals with the covenant. Talks about Binyam Mizbeach and Akrovas Karbonis. Talks about building a Mizbeach, bringing Karbonis, Hasdom Spritzing the Dam. So there it's talking about it not als a mitzvah. That's not talking it as a mitzvah. There it's talking about the concept of a korban, which a korban means the closeness between Eden and Hashem. And even the mitzvahs which are repeated here, that Eden have to separate from the wives and make Agbol on the mountain, which the Torah repeats, is Bishvil Shenes Chadish Bo. Rashi says, why did the Torah repeat it? Because there's something new that the Torah added here, the Prat von Aminas Nase. Because in connection to this, the Eden said, we will do. The Kabbalah for Eden, the acceptance of the Eden, as is eine Muchen und Meshubah zu onem and of sich libri Hashem, that they're ready and Meshubah to accept the words of Hashem. So Torah repeats it not just as a fact, telling us the fact was that they had a mitzvah to Prisha, a mitzvah of Hagbolah. It's telling us that the Eden gave themselves over to it. So B'meile, this is another inyan of the inyan of Bris's Bris. So now, since we know that, we see that in Parsha Tishrei it talks about receiving the mitzvahs, and here it talks about receiving the bris. The meat is entered bepasht as the hemshech seder apashah said that explains simply the hemshech of the seder of the parsha, the way the seder of the parsha yonim is in the seders, and we said there it seemed to be mixed up. It's not mixed up at all. Früher steht in Torah das was is shaychus im Meshnin in Matan Torah. First the Torah talks about, which is in Yisrael, about the first thing in Matan Torah, ubishleimus, complete. The sinas mitzvahs within that Torah talks about Hashem giving the mitzvahs and the dinim of the Torah. The mitzvahs als achonet to Matan Torah. He gave us mitzvahs as achonet to Matan Torah, the mitzvah of Prisha Vagbol, he said before. Then it talks about Matan Torah, which is also mitzvahs, aseres adibris mitzvahs. Then it talks Parshas Mizbeach, was kommt gleich noch Matan Torah. It talks about the Parsha Mizbeach, which comes right after. This is all mitzvahs. Und ve'ela mishpotim, then comes right after Ela mishpotim. What's Ela mishpotim? The halachas of Torah. Hilchas HaTorah, but the Rabbi should have learned Moshe Bahar in the Aborim Yom. The Torah, the halachas that Moshe learned the 40 days. We said Mishpotim, according to Rashi, is all these halachas that Moshe taught, Rabbi taught Moshe during the 40 days. It's written right after Yisrael. Not written, but that's, we're going to see what happens at the end of Mishpotim is the second half. This is talking, in Yisrael, it talks about the mitzvahs. Even accepted the mitzvah, were told mitzvahs, and they did, and the mitzvahs they did, and then Mishpotim are also the mitzvahs they were given, even though it was given later, it was told to Moshe in the 40 days, but it's all one hemshech. Well, after the Torah finishes in Mishpotim finishes that first inyan of Matan Torah. Yisrael and Mishpotim is all one inyan, the inyan of mitzvahs. When that is finished, hebt on the Torah, mefared sein das, was at the Sheicha zum zweiten inyan Matan Torah, the Christus Bris. Then the Torah starts going into another thing. The second aspect of Matan Torah, the covenant that was made between Yidden and Eibishter, talks about these things. Aber ich sage, ich verantworte, was the Torah to tell them Sipur, but Elias Moshe Bar noch Matan Torah, can also see base. This will also explain why when the Torah divides, when Moshe went up to the mountain after Matan Torah, the Torah divides it. The Torah says it first, and then later it says it again. And we asked the Kasha, why is he dividing this thing twice? So the answer is, because Moshe is going up to the mountain for 40 days, also had two inyonim. Number one, the Rabbi he taught them the mitzvahs. Like we said before, he taught them Achukim v'Mishpotim, and as Rasha says, those goes on everything that learn the Pasha Mishpotim. The second thing that happened by the 40 days, v'etnu luchos luches, however, they gave you the luches made of stone. For the matorah from the nesinas aluches, the purpose of the giving the luches is the pashtus. What's the simple reason? Not to have what to learn from. Nor thus was the luches or edus, luches abris. It's luches that testify the connection of Yidden and Eibishter, and luches abris, luches that are represent the bris, the covenant weakness. They dienen wie an edus of the bris. But the Eibishter at Keres Gamitiden b'Matan Torah b'Shmiras HaTorah. It represents. It's like a testimony for the bris that the Eibishter made with Yidden that they will keep the mitzvahs. But it's not the acts of mitzvahs. It's the bris considered the mitzvahs. When the mitzvahs move, now we understand. But the Eshter Inyan and now and the Arboim Yem, like the first Inyan in the 40 days, Ve'la Mishpotim, which is in the 40 days, we said why does it mixed? First, that talks about the Mishpotim, which is within the 40 days. Later, it talks about something that happened before, by time of Matan Torah. See, now we know why. Because the 40 days, the Mishpotim, which were in the 40 days, come right after Taseres Adibris in the Parasha of Mizbeach. Because that's one thing. The Inyan of mitzvahs. And it tells us what happened in the beginning, right by Matan Torah and before Matan Torah concerning the mitzvahs. And what happened after Matan Torah concerning the mitzvahs. And the 40 days also concerning the mitzvahs. On their inyan from Alei Alayahora Vetnas Luchas Eben, the second inyan, going up to the mountain, the Davish to giving the Luchas, the Sheichas some zweiten inyan Matan Torah Christus Bris. That's a separate inyan. That has a Sheichas to what is written in the end of Parshas Mishpotim. There, if you look, it doesn't talk about the keeping of the mitzvahs. There it talks about the bris that Davish. So that's a separate section altogether. Yesh Leimer Adam Chilek Anal could say that this difference between the two parts, Yisrael and Mishpotim, Daite Rasha points to it by the exact wording he uses. Rasha says like this. It says here, as we said before, to Moshe he said, go up. That's the wording that Rasha quotes from the Pasuk. And Rasha adds, this was said before Aseres, as we learned before. The Rebbe says, first glance, number one, why does Rashi also quote in the beginning, in the quote of the Pasuk, the word Alei? So the would have been enough. Rashi would have just quoted the words Vel Meisha Omar, or the Nor Vel Meisha, maybe not even the word Alei, no, just Vel Meisha, and we would know what he's talking about. He says this parsha, and it was said, so we know what he's talking about. So he could have wrote Meisha, only Velmeisha, or at least Velmeisha, maybe Velmeisha Omar. But why did he have to add the word Alei? All he's trying to say, when was this parsha said? So write the first words of the parsha and say this parsha was said before Matan Torah, before Aseres Adibris. Why does he add the word Alei? Another question. Was the time was Nutzim Loshen Kedem Aseres Adibris? Why does he say this parsha was said before Aseres Adibris? And he doesn't write the Loshen before Matan Torah. Many Mefarshim, in order of 50, the Rebbe said, many Mefarshim used it before Matan Torah. Nochmer, it's even more question. The Pirusha al-Shas, in Rasha's commentary on Gemara, in Gemara Gittin, Zok Taker Rasha dem Loshen, Vel Meish Omer Aleik, the game, Kedem Matan Torah. He says that when he said Meish Omer Aleik, it was said before Matan Torah. It doesn't say before Aseres Adibris. So we see two diyukim, two, not kashas, but exact wording, which could have been different. And the Rebbe said, the zwei diyukim analysis, seine noch mehr Beilet, these two diyukim are more obvious, which has been vergleicht am Rosh and Rashi of dem Posik, mit dem Rosh and Rashi from weiterdinke Posik. If you compare the way Rashi writes it here, And we Rasha writes, and a further pasuk which seems to be saying the same thing. Vayemer Hashem el Moshe, which is towards the very end of the parsha. It says, as we quoted before, Vayemer Hashem el Moshe alei alai hora. Hashem spoke to Moshe, said, "Go up to me in the mountain." Dort zogt Rasha. There Rasha said, Vayemer Hashem el Moshe. Hashem spoke to Moshe. There it says the words la'achar matan Torah. So number one, Rasha is not nit maitik alei. Rasha doesn't quote the word alei. The pasuk says Vayemer Hashem el Moshe alei alai hora. Rasha just quotes Vayemer Hashem el Moshe. Not like over here where he quotes also the word alei. And the second thing, base, then Rasha says this was said la'achar matan Torah. He uses the word matan Torah. Nit aseres adibris. Here when he says it happened before, Rasha doesn't say it happened before aseres adibris. Why does Rasha change to Loshen? Based on what we said before, we could say like this. Rasha is trying to tell us, as mit der Parsha hebt sich on der Sipur von dem zweiten Inyan Matan Torah, that when it comes to this Parsha, at the end of Mishpotim, where it says, Vayemer Hashem Moshe, Moshe Amar Alei El Hashem, etc., Rasha is trying to tell us that now starts another section, another aspect of the story of Matan Torah. Udos is Rasha Madgish. That's what Rasha means to say, Parsha Zunemro Kedem Aseres Adibris. The Parsha was said before Aseres Adibris. We said before, Aseres Adibris is what? Is the mitzvahs. The mit made Rasha zu sagen. Rasha wants to tell us, nicht nur wenn das gesagt geworden. Simple pshat, Rasha is trying to tell us when was this Parsha said. So he said, oh, it was before Aseres Adibris. It goes back to the time of Parsha Yisri. So Rebbe, Rasha wants to say not only that, nur eich zu sagen, that die Parsha, weil Moshe Omer Alei, beteichno gesagt geworden, noch Eideres hat sich angegeben, der erste Ringen in all Matan Torah, Aseres Adibris. We said before, Aseres Adibris is the first thing in the Matan Torah, which is the mitzvahs. Rasha wants to tell us that this Parsha from here was said before the mitzvahs. In other words, the second inyan of Matan Torah was said before. The Torah before doesn't talk about that second inyan. The Torah divides it into two. But Rasha is trying to tell us that what we're going to learn now is said before the mitzvahs, before Aseres Adibris. So that's why he uses the word Aseres Adibris, not Matan Torah. Matan Torah wouldn't say, Matan Torah is a general expression. Aseres Adibris, the Rebbe learns, is the expression of the first inyan of mitzvahs. 10 commandments, so to speak, even though the word Dibris doesn't mean commandments, but that's the Teichen, the 10 commandments. And this Rashi is trying to tell us it was said before, but it's a separate inyan. It's not the inyan of Aseres Adibris as mitzvahs. It's the inyan of Matan Torah. So Rashi says it was said before Aseres Adibris. And the far is Rashi Eich Maitik in Dibra Maskal and Vort Alei. That's what Rashi also quotes in this, when he quotes the words from the post in Dibra Maskal, the word L'mei Shomer Alei. Well, those is the Teichen of Parsha. So Rashi is trying to tell us that now starts the second aspect of Matan Torah, which is the inyan, the Moshe Te'ele given al Hashem. Moshe went up to Hashem. What does it mean he went up? Went up Hashem, that has nothing to do with mitzvahs. That has to do with connection. Moshe representing the Eden, connected to Hashem. So the Rashi brings, Moshe Omar Alei, to Moshe he said, go up. So you know, now we're talking about going up to Hashem, connecting to Hashem. And this is said before Aseres Adibris. It's a separate inyan. It was really said before, but not part of the Aseres of the inyan of Aseres Adibris. The mitzvah is part of Matan Torah, but not Aseres Adibris. But there is a zeichler weiter dik hemshach advorim. And also further, what it says, Vayal Moshe ve'Aaron lo devavi v'shid mezikne Yisrael. It says Moshe and Aaron lo devavi, and the 70s elders from Eden went up. Vayiru es Elokei Yisrael, they saw Hashem, etc., etc. So again, this is another thing that happened, that they went up and saw. It's all not mitzvahs. It's all connection to Hashem. The same thing, the next parsha, where it says, Vayemer Hashem o Moshe Alei. Hashem said to Moshe, God, which is the very end of Parshas Mishpotim. Again, Moshe said, go up. And it says, may I go up to him. Vayal Moshe, Moshe went up. These are all in Yonim that push this concept that this is the second inyan of connection. But those are the teich with the zweiten inyan of Matan Torah. That's the context of the second inyan of Matan Torah. As durch Christus Bris an Eden, Eile werden zugebunden zum Eibischen. That through the bris, the covenant that Eibishter made, Eden are going up and become tied to the Eibishter. V'yisem li zgula. V'yisem, which Eibishter said in the beginning, zgula means also Maloshen Iskashres, Unaliyah Hashem, that you connect to Hashem and you go up to Hashem. V'rei mamtonu, like we use the word V'rei mamtonu, you elevated us. That's not the inyan of mitzvahs, that's our connection as Eden to the Eibishter. So now the Rebbe says, Leib, Bir Anal, and they say that a parsha is Matan Torah, based on what he said before, they say that a parsha, the first thing goes through the whole parshas and all the inyonim, not according to the time, but all the inyonim in one aspect, which is the inyonim of the mitzvahs. And then starts again, at the end of Parsha Mishpotim, the inyonim it has to do with the second aspect. even though it means that some of the timing is broken up, it doesn't matter because he tries to make it according to the inyonim. So according to that, you can also explain the order of the parshas after Parsha Mishpat. The Sitas Rasha Bepirusha Torah, according to Rasha, on the Rasha in commentary on the Torah, the commandment of Hashem to make the Mishkan, which is what is written in the Sedres and Truma and Tetzaveh and Ascholas Parsha Sisa, which is written in the Seder of Truma and Tetzaveh and the beginning of Kisiso. So according to Rasha, they were Gizogevon Lachramai Seivel. They were said after the Egel. Not in Torah is as Kosofri. In Torah it's written earlier because the Egel is written after in Parsha Kisiso later. So Truma Tetzaveh and the beginning of Kisiso really happened after what says in Parsha Kisiso later. But never, Rasha says it's written before but happened later. Because there's a rule. There's no Seder in the Torah according to the chronological order, so it doesn't matter. It's written earlier, but it happened later. But the Rebbe says, Apia now see follow based on what we said in the beginning, that the Chomas Borim need an explanation. We said before that even when the Torah changes the order, it's not Stam changes the order. There has to be a reason why the Torah did it. So the question here is, for was the Torah Magdim schreiben dem Tzivi of Melechas HaMishkan for my Segel? Why did the Torah write about the Mishkan before the Egel? If the Tzivi, the Eibish's commandment to make a Mishkan happened later, what's the reason? If we have a reason, then we don't care about the chronological order. But what is the reason? This movement latent will be understood what we said before. The Torah will masmach sein, the Parsha is from Sivim Melechas HaMishkan zum Siyum von unser Seder. The Torah wants that the commandment to make a Mishkan should come right in connection, right after the end of Parshas Mishpotim, which is something that we always find smichas HaParshas. Rasha zog betchilas haseder. Rasha beginning of Mishpotim says, "Asiyim Parsha Yisrael asmichos umkesher mit ascholas Parsha Mishpotim." The end of Parsha Yisrael has a connection to the beginning of Mishpotim. So here too, the Rebbe says, according to Rasha, there is the Rasha. We understand that the Torah wrote Truma Tetzaveh right after Parsha Mishpotim because there's a connection. Why? What's the connection? The Torah wants that there should the mitzvah of making the Mishkan should come right after the end of Mishpotim. Wo es redt sich wegen dem zweiten Inyan Matan Torah. We said before in the end of Mishpotim, it talks about the second Inyan of the Matan Torah, which is He told Moshe go up. It's not about the mitzvahs. It's about connecting to Hashem. So the Truma Tetzaveh, what talks about the Mishkan, is connected to that Inyan. But the Gemar v'Shleimus from them Inyan the Matan Torah, the completion and the having completely the end of this part of Matan Torah. The Inyan of giving mitzvahs, so David should give the mitzvahs, but the completion of this connection of Yidden to the Eibishter, which is the second aspect of Matan Torah, which is the bris v'kesher zwischen Yidden mit Eibishter, the covenant and the connection, the knot between the Eibishter, that happened through making the Mishkan. So that's the reason, since we said that the whole end of Parsha Mishpotim talks about the second aspect of Matan Torah, the connection, so the Torah would like to right away write about the Mishkan, because that's when that connection came to its completion. Now the Rebbe says that Bir Bezeh, the Pnimius, explain what we said before. Al Pichsidus in Pnimius. Steht im Medrash am B'shas Matan Torah mit Zevchukit on 2 Yonim. It says in Medrash by Matan Torah 2 things happened. Hol Yenim Yedel Tachtenim. Let me explain for you. The Medrash says gives a moshel. For Matan Torah is Shemayim Hashem V'oras Nosam B'nei Odom. Spiritual things were Hashem. That's called El Yenim, and Gashmis is Tachtenim. And David made a decree. El Yenim Le'edet Tachtenim. The El Yenim, the ones from above, Ruchnius should not come down to Gashmis. Tachtenim, the down here, should go up. Lil Yenim should not go up. And Matan Torah, the Eibishter said both things he took away, the decree of both. What did he say? Hal Yenim Yedel Tachtenim, the ones above should come down. And the Medrash brings a posik. We see Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai. The Eibishter from above came down to Har Sinai, which is the Isgalus Elokus Mamayla Lamata, the revelation of godliness from above down. And the second thing that happened is Tachtenim Yalol Ol Yenim, that from below should connect to the above. And he quotes a pasuk. Vel Meisha Omar, he told Meisha was down here, Alei al Hashem, go up to Hashem, which is the pasuk we quoted before, which is Aliyas Hatachten Lamaila, the going up from the one below, going up. This is what it says in Medrash. Und das ist der Chilik zwischen die zwei Parshas, wegen Matan Torah, Parsha Yisha, Parsha Mishpotim. These two things, whether it's the Hisgalus Melmaila Lamata, El Yenim coming down, or the Tachtenim going up, those are the two different Inyonim, two Parshas about Matan Torah that we have in Parsha Yisra Mishpotim. In Parsha Yisra, it's a big event Matan Torah with us inside El Yenim. In Parsha Yisra, it talks about Matan Torah, mainly the way the El Yenim will come down, the way it's coming as a Gilui Melmaila. Vayered Hashem Har Sinai. Vaydaber Elikim Hashem Kedar Sinai. Hashem spoke, and he said the Aseres Hadibros Hashem spoke. The Pasha Seinu Retzach Bike wegen Matan Teire, wie das im Tzatachtenim. In Mishpotim, it talks about Matan Teire as the Tachtenim go up. David said that's the end of Mishpotim. Or Moshe Amar Alei al Hashem, go up. And Kedom es Nasa Nishma, that Eden said Nasa before Nishma, which is not just the keeping of the mitzvahs. It's the connection. We won't even accept an explanation. That's the giving themselves over. There it talks about the building of the Mizbeach before Matan Torah, bringing karbonas, krisis, breeze, the covenant. That's all things that the Tachten has to do no matter. So he says the chilek between the zwei Yonim and Matan Torah, the difference between these two Yonim and Matan Torah is these galas atzumim l'mayla b'shas Matan Torah. There was a great revelation at Matan Torah's time. It came down. Yorat kisei hakavod, the Rebbe came down. This with his glory. There's the Merkava, the chariot that's up there came down. Shmiyas b'yagvura, they heard from Hashem. Is given English, but all that was only lefisho, only temporary. After Matan Torah it stopped. Eden was the elevation of the Tachten to up, which means Eden got elevated, was Eden seinen geworden Avdi Hashem. Eden became by Matan Torah the Avodim to Hashem. Und Mider Heden geworden, and they got elevated. But he elevated us. That's something forever. The Baldos the Tachtenim Guf, came from the Tachtenim. It was nikva geworden napnimis, napnimis. When you get something from outside of you, while it's there. When it goes away, it wears off. But something that comes from within you, it stays longer. And that's why the second part, the Tachtenim Yalav Yenim, which is the connection to Hashem that comes from the Eden, that stayed forever. Und das ist der Bier in des Miches Aparshes von Tzviru Melechus HaMishkan from zweiten Linien in Matan Torah. And that's the connection, showing the connection of the Parshas of the Mishkan. And he said before, it's the end. It comes right after the end of Parashas Mishpotim because it's connected to the second union of Matan Torah. The Meish Omar Alei al Hashem, which starts off with the words Hashem, and to Meish Hashem said, "Go up." This is now we understand more. While the roof to from the Ashros Hashchina Mishkan, Gab Ashros Hashchina Beis Matan Torah, the Geretam al Baruch, because there was something special that happened in the Mishkan, the revelation of Hashem in the Mishkan, and the revelation of the Mishkan in Har Sinai. The Ashros Hashchina Mishkan gekommen durch Wasser the Mikdash. The Shchina rested in the Mishkan came because he said, "You make me a Mikdash." And the Order 67, the Rebbe says, and by every part of the Mishkan it says, "Tasu, Tase, do." It all came from our doing. At the Asiyas Bnei Yisrael, the doing of the Eden. The Balda the Ashros Hashchina gekommen durch Asiyas Hodem sind the Shchina. The resting of the Shchina came through the action of the people. Is the Kedusha nik geworden in der Hefze Geshem HaMishkan. The Kedusha got absorbed, penetrated into the physicality, the Mishkan itself. Not like Matan Torah that the Shechina came down and they became holy, but in Sheikh HaYevel, it said, Hema Yala Bor. David said, when the shofar will blow, then you're able to go up in the mountain, because that's a simmer siluk Shechina, that's a simmer that the Shechina left. So by Har Sinai, when it left, While Har Sinai is free geworden, why could you go up? Because it became back, Vivi Free, like before, it became back Chel. Because it's not something that stayed permanently. But the Mishkan is something that stayed constantly. Und der Linien von Asiyas HaMishkan is a Hemshet Tachtenim Yalol Yenim from Matan Torah. And this making the Mishkan is a continuation of the fact of the second half of Matan Torah, which is Tachtenim Yalol Yenim. While Zayin Shleimus is, when is the Shleimus, the completion of this level of the Tachtenim going up, as the Tut Eich Uf in the Rizgalus Elkus L'maylo L'matet accomplishes that even the Elokus that comes down from above, because you connected to it from below, even that stays. The Eibush is resting, which is galus by Matan Torah, Taka came from above and didn't stay. But by the Mishkan, we worked on it, so we made that these galus that came Milmaila by the Mishkan is not even for Kvias, it's established, it's for not temporary, permanent, and it's nitzchi, it's eternal forever. So this is the way Al Tirsidas, the two sides. One is Al Yenim Yal Tachtein, and that's the connection to Pasha Truman Tetzav.